and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Noah, and I wanted to welcome all of you to another video in this string of videos here on my YouTube channel where I go over life with different income levels. We started out this series with a salary of $40,000, and I'm happy to say that we are finally at the six-figure mark, $100,000. So with that being said, let's get into this episode of Life with $100,000. Okay, so here we are in Excel as always, and like I said, this episode is going to be structured around what life can be like, assuming you're one of three different individuals, right? You're a conservative individual where you're really trying to focus in on all of your benefits. You're kind of a exorbitant individual, right, where you want to take home as much of the money as you can and spend it in, somewhat frivolous ways, so to speak. And then there's this happy medium, someone who wants to ensure that they have benefits and they are planning for their retirement, but they also want to take home a little bit of money for living or cars or trips or whatever it may be. So we're finally there. We are finally at $100,000. So let's see if this kind of gets my stamp of approval as far as efficiently moving out and basically having a life on your own. So like I said, the first scenario, right, is a individual who is hyper focused on all of their benefits. This hasn't changed through any of these videos, but as I discussed, the salary is $100,000, which leads the check amount, which in all of these examples is basically 26 pay periods per year. So, every other week, just about. Is going to be $3,846. And of course, we have all of our deductions, right? These are our deductions that come off of all of our checks, and then our taxes are basically calculated after that. So for the 401k, this is the maximum amount that that an individual can contribute into their 401k in 2024 at $884. Their health insurance is $80, their dental is $5, and their vision is $70. Where I got that basically these are my numbers, right? These are the numbers that I have with the company that I work at. The numbers that you might have are subject to change. Obviously, they could be higher, could be lower, depending on the program that your employer has kind of enrolled for all of the plans and so on. But I wanted to throw some general numbers in there to put something in there, right? And the amount that this individual is putting into their HSA or health savings account, which is a very, I think, underappreciated account, is 160, which also tends to be the maximum amount that an individual can contribute into this account per year. And this is per check, 160 per check, which finally leads our taxes per check to be $666. And then our take home per check after that then is going to be $1,981. Take home monthly, just under $4,300, which leads our take home annually to be $51,506. So this is a lot of money, right? A lot of green here. And it's interesting to note because we started this series, or it's not necessarily a series, but we started this string of videos with a salary of $40,000. And if you have, seen the earlier episodes, really what happened was after we got our salary and we would put money into these benefits, we didn't have anything left over. We really didn't have much money left over, and now we've come pretty far away where after our contributions to our benefits, our take home is $50,000. This is a lot of money that we can spend in whatever way that we want. So in this example, right, this person clearly has quite a bit of money to blow, right? They're maxing out their 401k, which is absolutely phenomenal, and they have benefits. So I think, this might be a portion or a salary where it might be appropriate to move out and have your own life and take on all of those expenses that life really has to offer. So let's throw in some of the expenses for essentials and see where that puts us. Okay, so I threw in our monthly expenses for all of our essential expenses. So our rent and electricity, groceries, vehicle, gasoline, and so on. Now, It's important to note that these aren't going to be reflective of everybody's situation. It's going to be different, right, from individual to individual. But generally speaking, I think this is a decent starting point. So these essential expenses are going to be $24,180. So it's about half of what we had to take home, right, in just our essential expenses, which leads the amount remaining, the amount of money left over, at $27,000. So there's still a decent chunk of money here. So I want to start putting in our non-essential expenses, or at least our examples of them, and we're going to see where our finances are at after that. Okay, so we just put in our non-essential expenses, and the total is $9,500 just about, which leaves our total amount remaining from the original $51,000 to be $17,846. So this looks pretty good, right? We obviously the numbers in here aren't reflective of everybody's scenario, but generally speaking, there's quite a bit of money left over, right? $17,000, almost $18,000 left over to save and invest in another account, right? Which is something that I always advise people to really look into. Having a 401k probably just isn't enough, in my personal opinion. You need to diversify into kind of the Roth area, and that's something that I think this individual could do here. So let's kind of put in some numbers for our saving and investing and see what we can come up with. Okay, so we just put in a couple numbers here to represent what our saving and external investing outside of our 401k might look like. And it looks like we could save, $900 per month, and we could invest the $580 per month on average to maximize a potential Roth IRA account, which has a maximum contribution limit of $7,000 in the year 2024. So, and we're not completely zeroed out either. We still have $86 left over, which is always good to see. But this is pretty good, right? It's better than pretty good. I think this is really good, and it's a good point to definitely note that if your finances are within this realm, right? If your essential expenses are in this ballpark, and if your non-essentials are in this ballpark, and your salary is here, you could very well maximize 401k and maximize your benefits, and then on top of that, you could save over $10,000 on the year, and you could also maximize a Roth IRA that year as well. Now, the important thing to note here, like everything, is that nothing's going to be perfect, right? So even though you might think that your expenses for your essentials are going to line up here, things go wrong, right? So there could be accidental expenses that would completely change this here. But from this view right now, exactly what we're looking at right here is very promising in my personal opinion. Obviously, it depends on where you're living and your circumstances and so on. But for someone who is hyper-focused on their investing and benefits, as in this scenario here, it actually looks like it could be very possible to have a life out on their own as well. So now moving into the second scenario, right? The individual who wants to take home as much of that money as possible and spend it, however they please. And this is kind of what we're looking at right now. Obviously, the salary is going to be the same at $100,000. The check amount is going to be $3,846. They're opting out of all of their benefits, right? So this is obviously a red flag, but this is something that people do, which leads their taxes per check to be just about $1,000, which is quite a bit, right? Considering that if you have 26 pay periods, that's $26,000 that are going away in taxes. So this leads our take home per check to be $2,827, and the take home annually to be a whopping $73,000 and some change, right? So $73,500, which is a lot of money to take home. And of course, they're not, they don't have the benefits and so on, but let's assume that they're not really concerned with that. And that's put in the same essential expenses and non-essential expenses that we used in the last example. So here we go. We have the $24,180 in essential expenses, and then the $9,500 in non-essential expenses. And this leads our total amount remaining from $73,000 down to $39,000. Nearly $40,000 are still left over after our essentials and non-essentials for this example. So this is still a lot of money, right? There's quite a bit of money here. So let's also put in the values for saving and investing here as well. So we just put in the saving and investing amounts here, the saving at $900 per month and the investing at $580 per month to ideally maximize another investment account, which is going to be the Roth IRA, which doesn't make sense, right? Because they're not investing in their 401k either. But this just goes to show that even after doing that, there's still $22,000 left over that they can play with, right? So I don't want people to misunderstand that this is definitely the way to go, because the biggest red flag here obviously is that they're not taking advantage of free money that could be offered through their 401k. And you also don't only want a Roth IRA investment account, as we're seeing right here. You want a taxable account as well. This is just basically how you're really going to grow your wealth over the long term. So it isn't quite the best idea for the long run, but certainly, it is definitely possible to run with these expenses and also have quite a bit of money left over. The other red flag, of course, is not having benefits. And I always say this because if something goes wrong medically, physically in this country, it's not that forgiving, right? It's going to very quickly add up depending on the severity of the bodily injury or whatever it may be. The other thing, of course, that I do want to mention is that the expenses, that I use here, the essential expenses and the non-essential expenses, are really estimates, and I think they're relatively conservative estimates as well. So, taking that into consideration, this $22,000 left over might not be too much after all. And the way I kind of like to show that is, of course, by manipulating the rent and mortgage, because rent right now is $1,000 a month, which the average here in Austin is right around $1,400 or $1,500 a month. So if we would add that in and just change a few of these numbers, we'll keep electric the same, maybe we'll keep utilities the same. But let's say groceries, maybe it's not 400, maybe it's 500, or maybe, something like that. Their vehicle, we have 300 here, but we do know that the average for a vehicle payment is higher than that at about 500, I believe. So let's maybe call this 450. We'll keep gasoline the same because we're feeling pretty nice. The other thing that can really change this is if there's a child involved. Child expenses generally tend to be extremely high. We're not gonna think about that in this example, just because it would really change a lot of things. It would be a completely different video. And we're also going to assume that there's no weird medical expenses that come up. So we're giving them in this example, really the benefit of the doubt. We're going to keep the pet expenses the same. But let's say they had student loans, right? A lot of people have student loans, and, depending on how much in student loans they actually have, it's going to determine how much they're going to have to pay monthly. But let's use maybe $300 here for a total of $3,600 on the year, which isn't too much, but we're also going to assume that they don't have any other debt, and we're going to keep their phone charges the same. Now, just from adjusting a few of those things, right, adjusting to maybe a more realistic rent payment, maybe having student loans, which a lot of people do, now that $22,000 quickly turned into $10,000. So, and that we haven't even touched the non-essential expenses, which we can do here as well. So the discretionary, right, all of the toys, right, and gadgets and clothes and shoes and things that we have, right, things that we like to play with. That didn't sound right, but I digress. So the monthly amount that we have for that is $200 right now. It, depending on the individual, I think this can be relatively low. I want to bump this up to $300 just for this example here, and entertainment as well, depending on the location that you're living and what type of entertainment you like to go for. $200 might be one weekend out, if I'm being quite candid. So I'm going to actually change this to $400 a month. $100 a week, is actually relatively reasonable. Beauty is another thing that changes very drastically between individuals, right, male to female and so on. Maybe maybe we'll make this 30 on average. I know that's actually, or not 300. Sorry, that's quite a bit. We'll make it 30. Just to call it simple. We'll say their gym membership is pretty cheap at 20. Maybe that's not something that they need to spend a lot of money on. Miscellaneous expenses, which happen all the time. They're just there. They're in your face, and you can't really get out of them either. From 150, maybe we bring it up to 250, right? I think that's still a reasonable amount based off of the clients that I've personally worked with. And then dining is a very big expense. There's a lot of data suggesting that dining out is more expensive than it ever has been here in the United States. And I don't doubt that, right? Dining out is just, it can be very nice, but the cost to what you're getting, kind of that ratio for me isn't really quite there. But in this example, we have 200. Maybe we bring this to, I say 400, maybe even 450, depending on the area that you're living. Maybe we go to 450. So now look at how much money we have left over, just under $3,000. So we went from having $22,000, or at least we thought we would have that much money left over, and by slightly adjusting, the expenses, the essentials and non-essentials, to be a little bit more realistic for what I've personally seen doing, my service here at AFA. The amount remaining is now a measly $2,700. So, this can be an issue, right? And like I said, the big red flags are they're not contributing to a 401k at all. They are contributing to a Roth IRA, perhaps, which is $7,000 on the year. But compare that to the first individual here who is investing not only the $7,000 in the Roth, but they're also investing $23,000 into their 401k as well. This person isn't doing any of that. So this is a lifestyle thing, right? There's a certain type of lifestyle that this individual likely wants to live, and they are foregoing a lot of the important benefits that I think are absolutely essential to consider prior to taking on these type of expenses on your own. So the third and final example, right? The happy medium between the hyper-focused individual and the individual that just doesn't care too much, right? The salary obviously is going to be the same. All of that is going to be the same. Where it's going to differ, however, are the HSA amount. So instead of 160 maximizing it and the 401k maximizing it at 884 per check, it's going to be 440 and then 80 respectively, and that would lead our taxes per check to be 816, our total take home to be $2,350, and the annual take home to be $61,000. Quite a bit of money still. So now let's put in the expenses, right, that we have been kind of working with and see where we end up. Okay, so we just put in our expenses here, the $24,000 for the essentials, the $10,000 for the non-essentials, and then the $17,000 between saving and investing. And we're still left with $10,000, just under $9,700, pardon me. So in this example, I think this is pretty reasonable as well. If you do have essential, or if you have essential and non-essential expenses that mimic what you're seeing here, it clearly shows that you can do decently well, right? You can still invest in not only your 401k, but your HSA as well as a Roth IRA, and then have benefits as well, and still potentially be left with a decent amount of money, right? So if your expenses are exactly like this, maybe your savings on the year isn't 10,000, maybe it's 10,000 plus another 10,000 that we see here. So maybe it's a total of $20,000 saved. So it really just depends, obviously, when we change the expenses slightly, right? So if we would take these expenses that we kind of adjusted to, right, to give kind of a more realistic approach. We're just after adjusting the essential expenses, we're already in the negative, right? So that would mean that we can't save as much. We would have to cut back on our saving. We would have to cut back on our Roth IRA, which is something that I really don't recommend. You should maximize that as early as you can in your working career. And, that's basically where we're at. I think we're in a good position, right? Where if your essential expenses and non-essential expenses conform kind of to, the first examples that I share, right? The very simple examples, even though they might not be the real picture for a lot of individuals. If they do align here, it can clearly show that you could potentially not only maximize all of your accounts, your 401k, your HSA, your benefits, but you could also have a max Roth IRA, and you could also get away with saving $10,000 a year with the salary. Now, of course, if your expenses, right, if your essentials and non-essentials are more geared toward, pardon me, the kind of the average, or at least the average that I've seen within assisting individuals with their finances, it doesn't bode too well, right? The expenses just are very, very high. $35,000 on essentials, and then $17,000 for non-essentials. The $100,000 pre-tax as a salary goes by pretty quickly, which is very interesting, right? Because I think we all assume that that's really a goal, right? Getting to that six figures and passing it, and continuing on, or whatever it may be. But clearly from this, it goes to show that this isn't really a crazy lifestyle either, right? They don't have any kind of supercar, or they don't have a huge house, a huge mortgage, right? It's only $1,400 a month, which is really low, and it's making the $100,000 salary look a little bit measly, right? Which is something that I think is a topic for a different video. But of course, this is all going to be subjective. It's going to be different individual to individual. But if you are in a position where your essential expenses and your non-essential expenses really conform to this, if they're relatively low, $100,000 might be a really good starting point for you to consider moving out on your own and having basically your own essential, or your own expenses and your own life. So there you have it. That is going to conclude this episode of Life with $100,000 here on my YouTube channel. I do want to know from you guys, what do you think of the examples that I've basically set forth here? Do you think they're relatively accurate, or am I missing something entirely? Please let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, if you have made it this far in the video, I want to thank you so much for your time. It did run on a little bit longer than I would have liked it to. However, there's just so much good information that I want to cover with these examples that it's kind of difficult to really make it a 10-minute video. But nevertheless, if you have stuck around, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, if you are in a position to where you're looking to augment your personal financial standing using financial analysis and personalized budgeting, that's exactly what I do here at AFA. If you have any questions for me personally, or if you'd like to take a look at the financial services that I can provide to you, I've left my email and a link to my company website in the description box below. As always, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, happy financing.